Anjali. Right, everyone, welcome to another wonderful session as part of our free and radical creative online series dedicated for radical pioneers, hosted by the wonderful good people at the University of the Underground and Union of Justice. And in this session, it is titled How to Change Policies in Nightlife. And our two wonderful guests are Julia and Anjali. And just a brief reminder to everyone that this session is being recorded, and if anyone is interested in the live transcript, please do click on the button down below. Just to introduce myself, my name is Majid. I am founder director of Union of Justice and board member of University of the Underground, as well as non-executive director at Tour de Moon, as well as a host of other things as well. A bit of a visual description of myself. I am a black male with a short beard with a beige cap facing forward and a grey hoodie. Just before we kick things off, I really want to share something super exciting with you all. And so I'm just going to share my screen. So guys, as you can see, we have got a wonderful opportunity for lots of young people here at Tour de Moon, and we are giving away a shit ton of money, to be precise. So like, if anyone wants to literally just partake in the festival, so we're just giving them money to kind of fund people, any sort of creative project to feature in our festival. So if anyone wants to create an immersive film, we can give you £25,000 each. Maybe a short film, maybe you just want to create a bit of digital artwork, that's perfectly fine. If you want to perform, write a play, DJ, literally there's just so much amazing opportunity. Even if you just want to write, submit a piece of writing to our zine. Heck, maybe you want to be the creative editor of our zine. So there's just lots of abundant opportunities. So I really implore all of you to kind of do check out. It's tourdemoon.com/apply, and do let all your friends and family know as well. So right, on to our session, and I want to really just first and foremost welcome both of our wonderful guests, which I'll hand over to shortly. So I'm just going to invite Julia first and Anjali to just introduce yourselves, a bit of a visual description, as well as a bit about your background, the work that you do, and then yeah, so we'll start off with you, Julia.
Thank you so much. Apologies for the little delay. That's the beauty of Zoom. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. Just a little visual description of myself. I'm a non-binary person, white person. I have very short, dark hair, and I'm wearing all black, and I'm wearing a nice hoodie with my dog on it. So that's that. I always think that's a very important detail. And I'm a human rights graduate, and I work with Good Night Out campaign. I really hope that in this session I will convey the passion I have for this organization and the important work we do. So yeah, I can't wait for it.
Brilliant. Just quick question in regards to your dog. What sort of dog is it, and what's your dog called?
He's a boxer, and he's called Toto, but he's in Italy with my family, so I don't get to see him as much as I'd like.
Okay, why Toto? I know it's going a bit off topic, but
he used to be an Italian actor with a very wonky looking face, and my dog has a wonky looking face. So
brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Julia. And Anjali, welcome.
Hiya. Yeah, thanks for having me as well. And I'm so excited to be here with Julia and the Good Night Out campaign. I love what you do, just real change makers in the industry. So yeah, this is super exciting. But yeah, to introduce myself, I'm a producer. I'm currently working with Tour de Moon. I'm the producer for Moon Press, so producing our monthly zines. And I used to do the club programming at a venue called The Yard, which was a nightclub and a theater. And aside from that, I've also done an MA in politics, where I focused on Black and Brown queer clubbing as a form of community organizing. And yeah, visual description, I'm a brown woman. I'm wearing like a cream colored fluffy jumper, and I'm against a gray background.
Amazing, thank you so much. And apparently Anjali's really efficient, shall we say, on TikTok, and really makes some great content. And okay, so just Julia, I know you kind of briefly touched upon in terms of the work that you do with the Good Night Out campaign, but it really would be great to, I guess, our listeners and people are going to be watching it afterwards, just to really let people know what the Good Night Out campaign is, what your role is within that, but also like how that really kind of goes into the topic of the day of basically how we can change policies in nightlife.
Absolutely, that would be my pleasure to just explain what we do and why we do it. Am I allowed to share my presentation?
Yes, you most certainly are. And there you go, you have access.
Yeah, perfect. Let me just make this work. Can you all see the presentation? Perfect. So just checking. Yes, thank you so much again for having me here. I'm just so excited, and I cannot wait to hear what everyone has to say. As you can see, and I will be describing the slides anyway, today I will be talking briefly about fun and freedom and not fear, which is what we try and convey with Good Night Out. So we try to build safer nightlife through education and culture change. Can you guys second slides? I'm just trying. Nope, it's still the first one. Okay. Sorry, let me just.
Now we do. I think it may be a bit delayed. We can see who we are.
Yeah. I think I just have. Sorry, give me just a second.
No problem, no rush.
There we go. Okay, so as I briefly mentioned before, I am a human rights graduate. I've been with Good Night Out for 3 years. Basically, the way I discovered about them, I participated to active bystander training while I was at uni. And the way this training was made just made me think that I needed to be part of this. I needed to know more about what this organization was doing, why they were doing it, who these people were, and I needed to be part of them. So I reached out to Bryony, which is our managing director, who's an amazing person. And the work was just, I fell in love with it. With Good Night Out, I managed to use both from my academic background and combine these with practical work. So GNR has been around since 2014. First, we started with a project with Hollebeck London to tackle street harassment. And then we moved to what we're currently doing, which is specialist training, working with the evening and the nighttime economy. So what we do into practice is train and accredit licensed premises, event organizer, and nightlife organization. We really work with a different list of people and venues to respond and to prevent gender-based violence. Our mission, which is stated really on all of our posters that you can see hopefully all around pubs and venues around the UK, is that we support nightlife to respond to and prevent gender-based violence, creating safer and more accountable workplaces and community. On screen now is just a little summary of all the different venues we work with. So we work with venues, bars, pubs, ticket vendors, support services, artists and performers. It's a really varied list of different people. We've worked with almost 3,000 trainees, more than 200 venues. It's a really interesting and different work every time. I personally am a trainer with Good Night Out campaign, so I step into place when we actually train the venues, and I spend 2.5 hours of trainings along with my co-trainer, and I love it because I get to see many different realities depending on the borough, depending on the council that we are training, depending on many things. Just a little bit about gender-based violence in general and what we are trying to achieve with our way of approaching and tackling gender-based violence. We know that gender-based violence happens when people feel entitled to the bodies and attention of others. The root causes of this are varied, very long, and I could dwell on this for the next 20 days, but I'll try to be short. And we know that they're rooted in sexism and misogyny, and in really years of cultural binary roles for men and women, which impose stricter roles onto people and make other people believe that they're entitled to other bodies. So we know that we need a different set of interventions. Our approach is community accountability, organizational accountability, active nightlife bystanders, and robust policies and practices. So these are all pretty words, but what do they mean in practice? We need these to be translated into practice, because we cannot just stay into the theory realm, which I really love. I love theory, I love reading, but we also need something to be translated into practice. So community accountability, by this we mean only the perpetrator is to blame for the harm. Harm is not, this is not inevitable. It's not about alcohol. This is only about choices. And when I say choices, I mean the choices that a person does and make them become the harasser. I do not mean the choice we make to drink, to dress in a certain way, and to enjoy a night out and get home safe. That is a right. The choice is in the hands of the person that decides to be a harasser. When people, we always say that when people make better choices, harassment stops. So it's really important to challenge this kind of behavior, but it's also important to see that everyone has a role to play in changing the context. By organizational accountability, we mean that the nightlife premises, organizations, the employers, they all have a proactive duty to care. So it's more of a preventative approach rather than a reactive approach. Bystanders are a really key and important part of our approach, because we want people to feel skilled and empowered enough to be able to step in and de-escalate when safe. Because we know if someone has a community behind the back and being able to step in when necessary, we would all feel much more safer than if we are in it alone and facing gender-based violence alone. And then robust policies and practices, that's when we step in with specialist training and regular briefing on safety procedures to put consequences consistently into practice. Our Good Night Out accreditation, it's kind of ongoing support for our participant. On the slide right now on the screen, our accreditation is divided into 5 main parts. The part that I do take care of is part 3, which is the training. But starting with part 1, the very beginning is the discussion. So we have a discussion with the manager on the current issues, the pain points, and the existing procedure of the venue. So what is it that they do? How can we make the situation better, and what needs to be the focus of our attention? Because as I mentioned before, different venues have different needs, even though there are common points across the spectrum. The second part would be the agreement. So there is an accreditation agreement with clear expectations, and we provide the best practice policy to the venue. The third part, as I mentioned, is where I step in as a trainer. We deliver 2.5-hour interactive session for staff, including managers, security, volunteers. This is currently done online. I used to be part of it also when people were real and not just a little Zoom icon. I remember those days, but you know, it's not all bad, because online training gave us the opportunity to see many more people than we could have, you know, in terms of logistics and all of the issues. So I am really appreciative of Zoom. The fourth part is the assets. So we supply customizable posters, badges for staff, and access to a bespoke digital dashboard. Now, I'm very adamant about this point because it's sometimes seen as a marketing strategy when it comes to badges, posters, and everything. So it's really important to put the accents on the fact that these are part of the training tools that we offer, and they're not just marketing strategy to get our name out there, because when someone goes into a venue, they go into a pub, they go into a concert, everything really, they need to know what that venue stands for. If they are accredited, what can they do? What are they trained to do? So it's really important to get our name out there and the policy out there and our mission out there, so that people can, they have expectation when, as they should, when they enter a venue, and they know that those people are there and they're trained, and they can listen to them, they can help them. And the fifth part, which I would not say is the final part, is the ongoing support and feedback, which includes quarterly check-ins, debriefings, and promotions. Now, I said that this is not the last part, because as I say to all of our trainees, this is just the beginning, really. This is what you see at the very, very beginning. It's what gets the ball rolling, but it's fundamental that this is just what sparks conversation. It's the first point of approach that venues have with us, but it has to be an ongoing conversation. It has to be something that keeps going, that keeps communities accountable, that keeps the venues accountable. And otherwise, if you see these as a final approach, it's not gonna reach the target that we want. I can't, there we go. On screen, there's just an example of our posters that I'm gonna really read, so sorry. We want you to have a good night out. Our team has been trained to listen and support you. If something or someone makes you feel uncomfortable, no matter how minor it seems, you can speak to someone, to our member staff, and they will work with you, so it doesn't have to ruin your experience. This is basically our mission statement. There's also our socials handles listed for any more information that people might need from our organization. And as I said before, this is a very important tool that we have. Every accredited premises has a policy that we give to them, and it's basically crafted both on the needs that the venue has and what a policy usually says. This is our best practice template, which has 3 main points. The first one is to take the targeted person wishes into account first and check what they'd like to do, and always avoid a response which could put the person at further risk or escalate the situation. Now, we know that when someone is the target of sexual harassment or sexual assault, their agency is taken away from them. There is a shift in power balances, so there is a power imbalance created, and that person is made feel as if they have no control over the situation, and everything else is in the hands of the harasser. So that's why it's really, really important to take the targeted person wishes into account and give the agency back to that person. The second point is always to talk with a co-worker, challenge the behavior, explain the consequences, and ask the harasser to leave. It's always good practice to check ID as well. The third point is that if you believe a crime has been committed, follow the license, call 101 and use the incident book. And of course, if there is an emergency, call 999, but always remember that the targeted person is under no obligation to engage with police at any time. So this is something that we stress always. If you think that it's worth to report whatever happened, please do it. But again, the person does not have to cooperate with police or be involved in the investigation. On screen, there is an example of how we communicate our policy. We do have badges saying having a good night out, we're trained to support you. So these can be something that people see as soon as they step into a pub, into a venue. Whenever they're about to take drinks, they can see that that person is being trained to support them, and posters as well, as I've mentioned. On screen now, there's just a couple of feedback pieces we've got from one in Sheffield, the other from Shetland Arts. one person says, by taking part in this training, I feel like we're being proactive rather than reactive when approaching harassment in our space, which is really what we want. What we are doing is not trying to put a bandage after someone already hurt themselves, but it's about changing attitude, changing policies, changing behaviors, hopefully before these materialize into practice. But of course, then we give a toolkit to be able to respond to this once it happens, if it happens. Another piece of feedback, I learned about the general clarification of the law, our obligations as license holders, as well as appropriate responses to incidents from staff. This is a part which I really like in our trainings. I'm usually the one delivering this part about the legal framework. I'm really fond of it, not because I think that we should lean onto the law often, or because we only have to believe into the criminal justice systems, because unfortunately we do have a long list of dark pieces of history which were condoned by law, which were very, very accepted at the time. But then now, looking in hindsight, there were possibly, as I mentioned, the most dark pieces of history. So what we say is that something doesn't have to be unlawful to be unacceptable, but it's important to know what our criminal justice system and encompasses, what we can do from a legal standpoint, and when we can draw a line in regards to what is lawful and what it is. So that's a part that I particularly enjoy. On screen now, there's just a picture of some of our amazing trainers and some percentage of how our trainees feel. So 29% feels there is an increase in their skills, 30% increase in their confidence, 25% increase in knowledge, and 99.7% says that the training was very relevant to their role, which is really amazing to hear. We still primarily work with venues who approach us directly, but we are being increasingly able to offer free accreditation and training to premises in specific areas. On screen, there's just a few examples of, let's say, our latest projects. Just in 2021, we've been funding through the Lambeth Council. There has been a funding of the accreditation of up to 30 premises, which is incredible. In 2020, Hackney and City of London, there has been a myth-busting poster campaign and open access training and toolkit. In 2020, Hounslow funded 5 premises, 2018, Greenwich funded 15. So these are big projects that we are really proud to be part of. There are, of course, challenges to this work. It's not all straightforward, as I'm sure everyone can imagine. Unfortunately, we do have workers consistently saying that they feel like sexual harassment might as well be in their job description. It goes without saying that you will be the subject of sexual harassment, which is horrible to hear. But I personally, for example, have been a hospitality worker for the past 4 years. So this also helps me understand a lot the realities of people who work in hospitality. There is also a confusing range of interventions. I'm sure that the majority of us know what Ask for Anjali is. It was a very, very popular campaign. It still is in some areas, but it's not standardized training. There are practical implications, and Ask for Anjali is no longer a code word. So this is why this can be quite confusing. The trainings are also not always quality assured, which can be an issue when people get to know us after getting to know many confusing possibly trainings that are not quality assured, because you can get confused if you're not part of this specific industry and are not able maybe to distinguish what's best. And premises are very often disincentivized to act. These are just some of the things on the screen right now that we believe in. Never punish the premises. There is a threshold of reporting which targets a review of the premise. After those reporting threshold gets hit, the premise gets reviewed. Therefore, the premise is not really incentivized to cooperate and to report because they could lose their license. So it's important not to punish the premises. It's important to name the problem. So to really talk about what is the problem, not really beat around the bush and call it for what it is and normalize it, and call out people for what they're actually doing. Challenging harmful attitude. So this is slow, deliberate, and difficult work that makes the big difference in the slow run, really. And staff and security need to feel upskilled and secure the way they will be supported. Victim-centered policies that are really, really important, for example, around domestic violence being led by what an individual says they need, because no one knows what the victim needs more than the victim themselves. To calmly but firmly challenge the unacceptable behavior, asking those who harass or assault your customer or staff to leave, provided you are satisfied that the person being targeted will not be harmed further as a result of doing so. So never assume what is going to happen. Gender-aware training. So must understand this is a hugely gendered behavior. The dots must be connected with broader gender inequalities. We do offer statistics during our training just to give a bigger understanding of what's going on in society. So someone who is LGBTQ+, experiencing harassment and barriers to reporting it, or someone whose harassment was also racist, harassment towards disabled people, it's really important to be aware of these differences. A clear guidance for all staff, so exactly knowing what they need to do, what they need to say, and how to intervene, and connect with specialist service. As we said, we are not just the end point, the start and end point. We are part of a bigger environment, a bigger space of people trying to change nightlife, trying to change policies. So it's really important to connect with local experts, women centers, signpost different kind of help, so that people can really have a holistic approach to what is changing policies and challenging behaviors. So these are, in our opinion, the must-have for nightlife safety interventions. And this is really what we do on a daily basis. I hope I've been clear in what we do. If I haven't, I'm always open to questions and comments. Now, tomorrow, in 3 months, I really hope that if anyone has even the slight comment or questions, we have social media. I'm always available personally. And yeah, thank you so much for listening to me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Julia. And lots to kind of really get into there. But I just want to just head over to Anjali and just for Anjali just kind of just talk about in terms of the work that she does and how maybe it can just be a response to the work that Julia's been doing. But I guess in terms of your own experience, and Anjali, how you kind of see in terms of like policies or how we can just make nightlife more accessible for people.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I just also like, thank you so much, Julia, for that presentation. I think the work you do is like so important and so incredible, especially in terms of like building a resilient nightlife sector, because I've found that often there's like a real gap sometimes between approaches to harm and safety between councils and between venues and between promoters. And I know specifically programming queer nightlife, I often saw that kind of struggle where they kind of brought their own specific approaches to safety that were at odds with the venue. So I think the kind of work that you're doing in terms of being kind of a link between these different sort of disparate parts within nightlife is just like the way forward. So yeah, really, really important. But yeah, I mean, I guess just to move on and talk a bit about like my work and my perspective on like policies in nightlife is that, I mean, I first wanted to just touch on that. I think the fact that we're having more and more like knowledge share events like this happening now within nightlife, and kind of talks and workshops and discussions about the nightlife sector at large and how to make things better is already a signal of a kind of change that's happening. Because I don't remember that happening pre-pandemic at this kind of frequency and at this scale. So I think there's definitely a drive already towards like reconsidering our industry and just how to make it better, because I think people don't really want to go back to what was happening before. Yeah, and I think that's partly because, you know, even though clubs are reopened now in the 16th plus months, long time that they were closed, it kind of revealed a lot of existing inequalities in our cultural industry. So like specifically within nightlife, like very precarious working conditions. Most of the industry is like, I think it's over 70% freelancers, you know, a lack of state support for it, something that I've also really noticed, like a huge gap in arts and culture and public funding when it comes to nightlife as kind of a creative industry and artistic activity, which is also a real struggle. So when venues shut, it kind of really brought into view how some forms of art and culture have different infrastructures, and so receive different kinds of support when it kind of comes to a crisis moment. And I think part of the reason is that nightlife sort of occupies this position between artistic and community and commercial planes in a way that not all other art forms do in exactly the same way. So I think in my work where I was programming the club program at the Yard, which is a theater and nightclub, I really saw that difference in terms of how artists worked, how, you know, some artists just like knew how to apply to funding. There was just a very different approach and very different support available. So yeah, I think that the fact that there are these multiple planes to kind of navigate and juggle makes it interesting at points, but also I think really tricky for nightlife workers who have to balance these sometimes competing things in order to be able to sustain themselves. But in terms of nightlife governance and policy, kind of in a top-down way from the government, it's mostly viewed as kind of a commercial industry under the term nighttime economy, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well. But it's kind of in the name, the focus of that category. And that framework, so an economic framework, is the way that the government supports nightlife, which kind of leaves a lot of its other values, so its social value, cultural value, artistic value, out alone, basically. And so I think while the pandemic has been very, very a very challenging moment for nightlife, it's also a real moment to publicly advocate for nightlife in its entirety in a way that I haven't really seen before. Like for the first time, I'm seeing articles about the nightlife sector and its social value in like more mainstream news sources, whereas before I'd only find those in like zines that were passed around in clubs. So I do think that there's definitely a shift there. And there's also far more advocacy movements, like the Save Nightlife movement, and new research coming out, like Vibe Lab's research on the global nightlife recovery plan. Kind of like people are putting this information out into the open and kind of sharing that information a lot more widely, which is like really exciting. But yeah, I've done mostly work within queer nightlife programming and producing, and through that, and obviously just through participating in it and researching it and talking to a lot of party organizers through my research, I've learned a lot about how people sort of navigate this context, this difficult context, and kind of make work and make careers out of it. So I thought that's just kind of, I thought I'll talk a little bit about like nightlife governments and then just share basically stuff that's come out of that, like ideas that I've learned from other people, which I found quite valuable. But yeah, so in terms of like nightlife governments and policies are the strategies used to regulate and support what happens in nightlife. And the government has quite a specific approach to this. So historically, nightlife was kind of in some points considered like a social problem that was criminalized and policed. And you kind of see that with like the raves being outlawed in the 1990s. But like increasingly today, it's more visible in strategies surrounding the nighttime economy, as I mentioned earlier. So that the nighttime economy is kind of aimed at developing new commercial and commercial markets and kind of like profit generating activities like alcohol sales. And a lot of these strategies sort of prioritize the needs of property developers and entertainment businesses that sometimes comes at the expense of independent nightlife workers. And I think that equation, specifically when it comes to queer nightlife, people out. And I think while there have been moves like the London Night Czar's support of LGBTQ+ venues, a lot of these policies focus on buildings and venues and don't necessarily extend to those who are less likely to own venues, like promoters, DJs, security, dancers, door people, which is actually most of the nightlife industry. So yeah, I think it can be a bit of a challenge, but whilst nightlife is no doubt like shaped by these more top-down strategies, I think what I learned, again, through just like learning from these incredible party organizers, is how they really creatively navigate these structures with a degree of agency and awareness and kind of like take some of that power back. So yeah, I'm just gonna kind of like list through some like tips for people working in nightlife or those interested in nightlife based on what I've learned. So like if you're a promoter or a programmer, to like really think about your organizational models and how you can support your audience or community in the way it needs. So I think programming responsibly is something that's really interesting. So like just literally ask people what they want in a night or what they might come for in a night. Another one is to focus on material impacts over representations of community. So actually think about where the money's going, where it's coming from, who's getting paid. That kind of stuff is really important. And I think sometimes, especially in like club culture, you can I've seen a lot of people get wrapped up in these romantic accounts of community, which is very much there in nightlife, but people also forget that it's a place of work. So it's really important to kind of consider the material impacts of the way you're running your nights over the symbolic or kind of like aesthetic idea of clubbing. And like moving on from that, clubbing is also a place of work for many people. So like, it's really important that we work to kind of improve the material realities of those working within it. So unionize if you're working within institutions or venues, and definitely push for things like more equitable pay. It's a struggle, but it's really important. I think also another thing that I've heard from a lot of party organizers is that art institutions sort of take a lot of like inspiration from yes, I just see a comment, bring the union, yes. Inspiration from nightlife, as kind of evidenced by, like, there's a lot of art institutions host these like late events, which are really fun, and they might like book a party or a promoter for that night. But I think for the institutions, it allows them to kind of diversify their audiences, which they can then report back to public funding. But for the promoter, it's kind of a fee for a one-off event. So I think if an institution approaches you for a one-off partnership, see if you can get more longer-term investment from them and kind of like leverage your cultural capital that you're bringing into them for what you and your community really needs. I think also another really exciting thing is being open and creative with what happens in a club space. So make a range of ways for people to participate in. I think the framework of the nighttime economy really wants it to focus on alcohol sales, which is obviously like very important for venues to survive, but there's so many other important aspects of nightlife that we need to continue to nourish and kind of showcase as important as well. So, whether it's like offering food or non-dancing activities at your night, just like think kind of beyond what you can do in a club space. And I've seen a lot of really great club nights doing this already, where they've got zine corners, they've got like workshops going on, or just like a range of activities, and they are really using it as a community space, which is exciting. But yeah, I think that's kind of like most of what I had. But I think I also just wanted to like plug Tour de Moon, because I think focusing on nightlife audiences in this kind of context and at this scale is like pretty unheard of and like very, very exciting and yeah, really important. So yeah, I think that's all I've got.
Amazing, that's more than enough. Thank you so much. But I just really, just first of all, guys, if anyone's got any questions or comments, please do feel free to ask your questions in the chat section. But I just got a question for Julia. First and foremost, Julia, in your presentation, you gave lots of examples of like Hackney, so a lot of the kind of mainly like London council, mainly south and east from what I saw. But are you seeing a lot of people taking up the program in other parts of the country or are interested to basically take part in the program?
Yeah, absolutely. At the moment, I cannot get at the top of my head if we're doing stuff similar to the Hackney and Lambeth Council in the UK, in the whole of the UK. But surely I know that we have trained many different venues in Scotland, Brighton, Sheffield, Bristol, many places that, as I mentioned, it's much easier now with Zoom that we can be, to be honest, in Australia if you wanted to, in 2 minutes and trained everyone. So it's much easier, but there is a big interest going around.
In terms of like, because you work with some of the local authorities, are you seeing that pick up with some of the local authorities in the north as well, in terms of like having accredited?
I don't think we have yet, but I can surely check that. But I don't think that we have had such a big scale response as we're having in London at the moment. But I'm sure there is things in the works for that.
Just matter of time, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just a question for both of you. I'm thinking, I guess we can have all these policies in place, right? We can have the bars can do a scheme, we can train staff, we can, like, the local authorities can pass a motion in full council. There's loads of stuff that basically can be done. But do you feel like you feel like it's actually being passed down to the person, that people who are going into the nightclubs, basically, or the pubs and the bars? How, like, do you think, like, I guess, do you have any data in terms of them, you've recently having actually a positive impact, and the way that you're having a positive impact on them, or people saying, or what I'm assuming there probably would be a lower case of certain instances and circumstances kind of thing. But do you think that it is filtering down to the ordinary person who's actually just coming and hopefully wants to have a free and fun time and one without fear kind of thing? I'm also kind of thinking of like that whole culture, basically.
Yeah, I think that the response to this question is in the question itself. It's a matter of the whole culture, which I believe we are participating in it to shape it differently and towards change. But when it is a matter of culture, we need more people to participate in it and to promote change, because it cannot be on the shoulders of one organization or a few promoters alone, because it's a big cultural shift that we are seeing in people. Especially, it's great to do it with student unions, with younger people, because when they do take part in our trainings, we then get feedback like, oh, I honestly thought it was one of the standardized trainings we need to do in order to be able to work, but it was actually challenging. And you see that they do start talking with their friends, and you get questions about can I actually understand what you do a little bit better. So I do believe that we are part of this change, but that we cannot do it alone.
Definitely can't do it alone. And Anjali, I guess with your experience of actually working in bars and clubs, I know it's a part theatre, part club, I think you said. But I guess with that comes a lot of working with different partners and other kind of venues across your networks and stuff. What do you kind of think is one of the biggest barriers that is possibly stopping venues from actually adopting progressive policies like the ones that you used to do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's kind of like there's an element of fear of not wanting to lose and impact your license that kind of prevents people from adopting new approaches, even if obviously it will prevent harm in the long run, like especially, you know, when it comes to the good night out approaches. But I think there's a certain reluctance to make change on that front, which is hard. And I think also, again, I've seen a lot of these sorts of changes being pushed by promoters themselves, and the kind of power they leverage against the venue sometimes makes it difficult for them to push those through, frankly, you know. So I think I think you really need multiple players to kind of make that kind of change happen, which is tough. I had a question for Julia, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about like how do people become good night out trainers, and like what does that process look like?
I am not sure of what's happening now, but in general, I can tell you that, for example, in my case, which I know it's a case that happened for many of our trainers, we reached out to the campaign, and there are some train the trainers days in which we basically get trained on how to train other people. We do a lot of shadowing before being able to actually train venues. So we just sit there, take notes, and see how the training actually goes. And then, yeah, we start doing the training. But it was really empowering, because I remember my train the trainer day. It was a full day training from like 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening. A room full of trainers. This is, of course, before COVID, and you get really hands-on to the work that GNO does, the numbers, the nitty-gritty details of what sexual harassment and sexual assault is. It's a really full-on training session there, but I believe it's really fundamental.
Amazing. Just a quick question, Anjali, in terms of unionizing, basically, because I guess pressure can come from all kind of aspects. Are there specific unions, or like, say if there was a group of people that wanted to unionize, what would be the best approach? And actually, apart from just coming together and self-representing as a group and speaking collectively, are there actually like organizations or just anything out there that people can just get that support to help unionize?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of nightlife specifically, there isn't. So that's like a real gap. I think that nightlife workers are, there's like bar union workers, but in terms of kind of like nightlife industry as a whole, which encompasses so many different roles, there's a lot of ununionized workers, especially like, yeah, like I said, there's just a range of roles. You have security, you're gonna have DJs, promoters, you're gonna have door staff, bar staff. So there isn't really that kind of collective movement yet. I guess I will just say I'm a part of United Voices of the World, and they have a design and cultural workers branch. And within that union, they do have a music and nightlife group. So yeah, it's quite small, but it's growing. So I think that kind of unionizing across the nightlife sector is like very much needed now, and I think is very much in its early stages.
Just a question for both of you, like in terms of what role do elected representatives, whether that be local councils? I know in London you've got the Night Czar, which is, I guess, it started off in Amsterdam. I think Amsterdam had the first Night May, and then of course London and other places kind of really adopted that model. Are you finding that, because sometimes politicians don't tend to go out, a lot of them just tend not to really value the nighttime economy or kind of see it as a real kind of powerhouse or a cultural aspect? It's what role, how can politicians or elected representatives like just get more on board, or like what is the relationship that you have got with those elected representatives to begin with, and do you feel as if that relationship can actually be better?
Do you want to go first, Anjali?
You go ahead.
Feel like I've been talking a lot. I didn't want to steal the spotlight. I feel that I was actually reading about this, about some trainings for the police, actually, for Ask for Angela campaign. And I really got a sour feeling when I read that. And I was actually asking myself, where are we in this training, not just the police, but all of our elected representatives, really, to know what it is that it's going on. out there, because if you live a sheltered life and then you get to implement some changes, but you don't know what it is, the reality, and what is it that we're doing day to day, it doesn't feel right. So I really think that there should be more involvement, also because there could be more communication between venues, and if something were to happen, so police were to be involved, emergency service had to be involved, or for policy changes, we could be on the same level. We could know what is it that we're talking about and be involved with Good Night Out and other organizations. But I do not, this is a personal take, I want to say that I'm speaking personally, I do not see enough movement from our elected representative to actually be involved in what is it that is happening. And I hope this can change, especially in light of what's been happening lately with Nightlife.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I would just agree with everything that you've said. I think there is quite a gap between those who participate in nightlife and those who regulate it. And I really hope that we find ways to narrow that gap. And I think one thing that I've certainly seen, certainly like since the pandemic, is given that there's a renewed interest and more advocacy around nightlife, there also is starting to be more research done, and kind of more specifically, like for example, Raise Collective is doing a research report on the impact of COVID on queer nightlife in London. So I think I feel hopeful about these kinds of forms of research that are a little bit more grassroots and being done on a smaller scale. And I hope that those will be able to represent the needs of the people involved in it, because it's kind of being conducted by them. So yeah, I think there's definitely more information like that coming out, but yeah, definitely I think there's a gap that needs to be resolved. And I think more people who participate in nightlife should be involved in those regulatory processes.
100%, and that's a really great point to kind of finish your session off. So honestly, thank you very much for not only just the work that you've been doing, but all the work that you're going to hopefully continue to do as well. So it's amazing to hear, especially about the project that you've been working on, Julia, and as well as the big work that you've been doing as well, and the encouragement to get everyone to join into the Moon Press as well. So yeah, just to thank you very much to both of you guys. And yeah, this brings this session to an end. And just a final reminder to everyone to do check out toadymoon.com/apply. And if anyone's got any questions in regards to the funding that we do have, you can also get in touch with hello@toadymoon.com. And thank you very much for joining us.